Who might God be calling you to forgive today, for their sake and yours? That's quite a question to start with, isn't it? It really makes you pause.
It does. It's one of those questions that cuts deep, touches something really personal and honestly often very difficult.
Yeah, forgiveness. It can feel huge, sometimes almost impossible. So today, we want to do a deep dive into this whole idea.
Exactly. But maybe looking at it not just as, one-off action,
Right, not just, okay, I forgave them, done.
more as a continuous way of life. Limitless forgiveness. What does that even look like?
Okay, limitless forgiveness. Let's unpack that. I know a key moment often points to is that exchange in the New Testament in Matthew's gospel.
Right. Matthew 18. Peter comes to Jesus.
Yeah, and he asks something that, well, I think a lot of us could probably relate to. He says, Lord, how many times should I forgive someone who sins against me? Like, up to 7 times.
So you got to pause on that number 7.
Right. Why 7?
Well, in that culture, 7 often meant, completeness, perfection almost. So Peter probably thought he was being incredibly generous.
He's thinking, 7 times? That's a lot. Surely that covers it, right?
Exactly. There has to be a limit somewhere. That's a human instinct, isn't it? We want boundaries, especially when we're hurt.
We absolutely do. But Jesus' answer, it just goes way beyond that kind of thinking.
Completely. He doesn't just say, yeah, 7's good. He says, I tell you, not 7 times, but 77 times.
77 times.
Yeah, and this is really crucial. The point isn't the specific number. You're not meant to, keep a running tally.
Ah, right. Get to 77 and you're off the hook.
Exactly not. That number 77, it's symbolic,
Meaning?
meaning infinity, essentially.
Yeah.
Boundlessness, a forgiveness that just doesn't have a numerical cap. It's a way of saying your forgiveness needs to be as limitless as, well, as God's grace.
Wow. Okay, so that immediately shifts things. It's not just an occasional task.
No. The teachings we're drawing from really frame it as a fundamental shift in perspective. They call it a lifestyle rooted in grace,
A lifestyle, not just an act.
a continuous practice, something you live out of day by day.
That feels much bigger and maybe more daunting because living that way, especially when dealing with real hurt, it brings up a lot of questions about what forgiveness actually is and maybe what it isn't.
That's a really important clarification, and these reflections are quite clear on this. Forgiveness is absolutely not about forgetting the pain.
Okay, that's huge because I think people hear forgive and think forget.
Right, and it's not that. It doesn't mean pretending the hurt didn't happen or that it wasn't significant. Your pain is real, it's valid.
And it's also not about excusing what happened, is it? Like saying, oh, it was okay.
Definitely not. That's another key point. Forgiveness doesn't mean you're condoning the action. It doesn't mean you're saying the offense was acceptable or that the person who caused the harm is suddenly off the hook for their responsibility.
So there can still be consequences. Trust might still be broken.
Absolutely. Forgiveness, in this context, is separated from those things.
Yeah.
You can forgive the person without saying the action was right, without automatically restoring trust, without removing natural consequences.
Okay, so if it's not forgetting and it's not excusing, what is it? What are we actually doing when we choose to forgive 77 times?
Well, fundamentally, it's presented as an active choice,
Mm-hmm.
a decision you make,
A choice about what?
a choice to release yourself,
Yeah.
to let go of the burden of bitterness, of resentment, of the need for revenge, maybe.
So it's less about letting them off the hook and more about letting yourself off the hook of carrying all that negativity.
That's a great way to put it. It's about letting go of your perceived right to hold on to that judgment against them. And in doing that, you free yourself from being emotionally chained to the offense and the offender.
That really changes the focus, doesn't it? It becomes about my own internal state, my own freedom. Because holding on to anger and bitterness,
Yeah.
it's exhausting. It feels heavy.
It's described exactly like that, a heavy burden. Forgiveness is the act of choosing to put that burden down.
Okay.
And this kind of boundless forgiveness, this 77 times idea, this lifestyle, it's deeply connected to the nature of God's grace. The idea is that we're called to mirror, in our own limited human way, the kind of unlimited mercy and love that God extends to us.
So our forgiveness is meant to be a reflection, an echo of that divine grace.
Precisely. It gives it a deeper why. It's not just a nice idea. It's about aligning ourselves with something fundamental about grace itself.
All right, so it's boundless. It's a lifestyle. It's about freeing ourselves, not forgetting or excusing, and it reflects divine grace. What about who we're supposed to forgive? Is it just other people?
That's another really critical dimension that often gets missed. Yes, forgiving others is central, but these teachings are very clear. This call to extend grace also applies inward,
Inward, you mean?
forgiving yourself.
Yeah, okay. That hits differently for a lot of people, I think.
It really does. We can be incredibly hard on ourselves, can't we? Holding on to past mistakes, regrets, things we wish we hadn't done or said, sometimes for years, decades even.
Yeah. The self-criticism loop can be brutal.
Absolutely. So extending that same 77 times grace to yourself, acknowledging your failures, your
Wow.
imperfections, the times you've hurt others, and choosing to release yourself from self-condemnation, that's presented as a vital part of this whole picture, maybe one of the hardest parts.
Applying that limitless mercy to the person in the mirror. Wow.
It makes it a complete circle, doesn't it? Receiving grace, extending grace to others, and extending grace inward to yourself.
It does. It sounds incredibly challenging, but also potentially incredibly liberating. Which brings us to the benefits. Because let's be honest, when you've been deeply hurt, forgiving can feel like you're losing something. Your anger, your right to be upset. It feels like the other person wins.
But the perspective offered here flips that entirely. Forgiveness isn't framed primarily as something you do for the offender.
No.
It's framed as a gift you give to yourself.
A gift to myself. How so?
Think about the cost of holding on to bitterness, the emotional energy it takes, the mental space it occupies. Replaying hurts, nurturing resentment. It drains you.
Uh-huh. It really does.
So when you choose to forgive, when you choose to release that person from your inner judgment, the teaching is that you unlock peace in your own heart.
Unlock peace. That's powerful. It's like trading that heavy burden we talked about for peace.
Exactly that. Forgiving frees us from the burden.
Yep.
It cuts the emotional chains that bind you to the past, pain and person associated with it. It doesn't erase history. It doesn't magically fix everything.
Right. Yeah.
But it allows you to move forward internally to find peace, regardless what the other person does or doesn't do.
Yeah.
The primary beneficiary of your forgiveness, in terms of inner freedom, is you.
That's a profound reframing. Okay, so this is a powerful ancient concept. Boundless forgiveness, a lifestyle, freeing ourselves, even forgiving ourselves. But does it still work? In our world today, does this feel relevant now?
It's a fair question. And the reflections we're looking at suggest strongly yes. Grace still works in today's world. This isn't just theory or ancient history.
How do we see that? Are there examples?
Well, without getting into specific headlines, think about the kinds of stories we still hear. Stories of reconciliation, of healing that happen against the odds.
Okay.
Maybe families torn apart by conflict who find a way back to each other. Or communities dealing with deep historical wounds or recent tragedies, finding ways, often through incredible acts of grace and forgiveness, to start healing those divisions, to come together.
Right. We do see those moments, and they often feel extraordinary. Like, how do they even do that?
Exactly. And those moments, wherever they happen, are presented as proof. Tangible evidence that this principle of extending grace, even when it seems undeserved or impossible, still has real transformative power right now. It's a living force, not just an old idea.
That's important. It shows it's not just for saints or people in stories, but something possible in our messy, real lives.
Precisely. And it all circles back to that core message, the main takeaway. Just as God's love is limitless, reaching beyond anything we could deserve.
Our forgiveness should also strive to be limitless.
Towards others, and crucially, towards ourselves. It connects our human capacity for mercy right back to that boundless divine nature. It sets a high bar, for sure.
An incredibly high bar.
But also, maybe a deeply liberating one.
This has been, well, a really insightful deep dive. We started with Peter wondering about limits, maybe just 7 times.
And saw the answer wasn't a number, but a call to something boundless. 77 times meaning unlimited.
We talked about how it's not just an act, but a lifestyle rooted in grace, and how important it is to know it's not forgetting or excusing.
Right, but an active choice to release bitterness, to free yourself.
And that includes forgiving ourselves, which is so often overlooked, but so vital.
Absolutely. And remembering the benefits that peace it unlocks within us. It truly is a gift we give ourselves.
And finally, seeing that, yes, this still matters, grace still works. We see glimpses of it, healing and reconciliation happening even now.
Offering hope that this isn't just an impossible ideal.
It really challenges us, doesn't it? Our instinct to hold on, to set limits, it calls us to something bigger.
It does.
So let's finish where we started. We'll leave this question with you, just to carry with you, to reflect on. Who might God be calling you to forgive today for their sake and yours?